Welcome everyone to another video. Today we are going to be looking at Cortex bots and the different compositions that we can do with them. Now, something interesting to note that is a bit unique compared to Cortex versus Armada T1 bots is the fact of how limited they are. T1 for Armada has a couple more options here to build. They have the Centurion, which you can pump out, and it has a laser cannon on it, which is pretty sweet. And then they also have ticks, which you can pump out as well, and those are fast scouting units. With Cortex, you only have really 4 options to choose from, so it's a very limited T2 or T1 bot factory, and you just kind of have to make do with what you got here. Now, if I remember correctly, these guys are a bit cheaper than Armada's versions of them. So the Cortex is more meant for spamming out large quantities of units a little bit more than Armada is as far as T1 bots go. That's just from what I remember. The Grunt's a little bit cheaper, the Thug's a little bit cheaper, and the Rocket Bot's a little bit cheaper than the Armada counterparts. Now, there is one thing about that though, and that is the fact that they do have a very high energy cost. That mostly goes for the Grunts. The Grunts cost almost as much energy as a Thug, and are very weak. So the Grunt is 800 energy versus this Thug, which has 1100 energy. So it's it's almost a comparable energy cost. So keep that in mind if you're going for the Cortex units. They are very energy dense units, especially the T1 early on, for how much metal they cost. But the metal is cheap, so it's very nice to be able to push with very weak cheaper units and just kind of swarm your enemy to the point where they just can't handle it. Now, something important to note about the T1 Grunt, this is their only rating bot they have in T1, and it got a recent speed debuff, so it's not going to be as fast as a pawn anymore, which we've already talked about that in a previous video. But it just means that you have a little bit of a slower scout compared to what you used to have, and it's not a big deal. It's still a really great rating unit. It has an extended range compared to a pawn, so it can be better at 1v1ing pawns if microed properly, but it doesn't quite have the same speed advantage that it used to. Now, the Thug, one of our other options we have, is very good at skirmishes. They're the tankiest plasma bot in the game as far as T1 goes. Yeah, they're better than any of their plasma bots as far as T1 goes. So the mace is pretty trash compared to the Thug, honestly. It has a really decent range. I believe it outranges all of the T1 tanks except maybe the Janus. So try to use its range to your advantage, and you can also gain a little bit more range advantage if you have it on a hill, because it does get a range buff with the hill as well, so you can lob your plasma further down the hill if it is on a hill. So you can use that to get a little bit of an advantage as well. But yeah, these are your core unit. You can just crank out tons of Thugs and really put in some hurt on the enemy with these guys. They're pretty slow. They're just average, they don't have anything crazy as far as speed goes, but they do have a little bit extra health, so pretty decent there, along with decent range. The Aggravator, these guys are going to be really great at taking out T1 defenses, like maybe a pop-up turret or a light laser turret or even a beamer turret. You should be able to take those out pretty efficiently with a single aggravator or a couple aggravators. You don't want to compose your army entirely out of aggravators most of the time, though, because they can get run down pretty easily by weaker units if you're not careful. So what I would recommend for a composition is, this is my personal preference anyway. You can, you know, compose your armies a little bit differently based on what you like. I would recommend going for, at the beginning of your matches, going for 5 of each unit, and then obviously mixing in some res bots as well, to just help heal anything that is taking damage, and also to resurrect anything that ends up dying. Try to have these guys off to the side and use their maneuverability to push up behind and hit maybe economy or get surround damage. That works too. And then have your thugs be lined up in the front here. So you would have your front line, you would have kind of a secondary front line that is off to the side, where you would have your rocket bots. So your rocket bots would be firing in from this side, your thugs would be firing in from this side, and your raiders would potentially try to either sneak past and like get some extra damage on economy, or they could sneak, like just try to like go swoop around behind kind of, and maybe hit some artillery that might be here, kill their rocket bots, maybe something like that, as your front line is aggravating their main group. Now, I do want to explain that the reason why it's important to separate these the rocket bot fire from the thugs is because they're going to end up killing each other. I'll try to give an example of this. So you have a rocket bot here, and he's just gonna shoot away, right? We'll give an example here. Boom. See, he doesn't, like, because of how slow that rocket fires, if you have a mix of thugs and the aggravators together, they're going to cause damage to each other very, very frequently. Whereas if you have your aggravators stringed out in a line, all shooting, where they all have a chance to shoot free, you're going to take a lot less damage by hitting yourself because of how slow those rockets are. So I definitely recommend that you separate your plasma bots from your rocket bots. It'll help you gain a bigger advantage and also do extra damage because you have a kind of a flanking. I don't know if it would activate flanking bonus or not, having them at like a 45-degree angle, but you can try to get flanking bonus with the grunts as well. So that's T1. Obviously you can throw in some thrashers just in case. It's always good to have a couple anti-air units as well, so probably like 2 or 3 of those in your composition throughout the game would help take out any shurikens or bombers that might come and try to harass your units. Especially if you're gaining an advantage, it would be handy to have them. Alrighty, now let's go on to T2, which we are going to be starting off with the Sheldon. I'm going to self-destruct all these just because we don't need them anymore, and that'll keep them from coming over. So I like to have everything in a group of 3. So like any artillery or long-range weapons or support units, I will generally put into group 3. Sometimes I'll move them to group 4 or group 2 depending on what's going on in my games, but generally I put them into group 3. So the Sheldon is a very, very strong unit if you have a ton of them. So they are pretty expensive. They cost 400 metal and 2000 energy, so you're going to want to get your T2 economy up first. You're going to want to upgrade your mexes to advanced mexes as quickly as possible. And then after you get those upgraded, you can just start compounding, like, you know, some 50, like 100 Sheldons and just have those building over time, hundreds and hundreds of Sheldons, right? And those things will be able to take out large groups of units very quickly if they're in a big group. Now, they do have a very long range. I think their range is slightly shorter than the sniper though, so you are susceptible to sniper fire, and you're also susceptible to spam units. So if someone's throwing a bunch of ticks at you, a bunch of pawns at you, maybe fiends, whatever it might be, faster moving units, the Sheldon's going to be weaker against those and end up taking extra damage from just not being able to kill those faster units in time. If you do build Sheldon, I strongly recommend that you add radar units to them. The radar unit, the radar bot, is very good at getting the extra radar signature. A very long distance radar signature, further than a T1 for sure. I think it's basically a T2 radar signature that can move, so it's pretty nice. And then you also have your radar jammer. Now the radar jammer is going to be very good at blocking any radar signatures. So the only way that the Sheldons will be visible at that point would be if they have a direct line of sight. So if a unit has a direct line of sight of them, they will be able to get shot. So that's why we recommend always having your artillery with radar jamming and radar. That way it increases their maximum distance they can see the enemy, and it also protects them from getting counter artillery shots fired on them. Okay, and now we got the... Oh yeah, I wanted to mention one more thing actually, the Sumo. So if you do go for Sheldon, since they are susceptible to spam, it would be recommended to have a couple Sumo that you have in front of them, similar to how you would have shock bots in front of your snipers. Bring a Sumo because they can take out those little guys very easily. They fire pretty quickly. Obviously, I don't have very much energy built up here, but they fire pretty quickly, and you can end up doing plenty of extra damage, taking out those little spammy units while also having that extended range to shoot down any further away artillery and things of that nature. So Sumos go excellent grouped in with Sheldons. Another type of unit that we have is the Arbiter. The Arbiter I like to pair honestly with the Mammoth, and I would always have the radar and radar jammer with the Arbiter if you have like a bunch of Arbiters grouped up. Now the Mammoth is very powerful. It's able to do a lot of damage per shot. It has so at longest distance it does 250 damage per shot, which is pretty good, and lasers are very accurate most of the time, so it doesn't really ever miss that 250 damage. And then at close range it can do 500 damage, and it's also got an insane 15,000 health as well. So this is a very strong unit, and I honestly love to build compositions with it, even though it's very slow. Slow and steady wins the race, as you guys have heard, and that is definitely the case for the Mammoth. But yeah, the Arbiter has a extended range, so I like to pair the Arbiter with the Mammoth because the Arbiter can take out any artillery that are taking them out, sniper fire, anything like that. The Arbiter will take out with ease. Any heavy like laser towers like the Pulsar, starlights, things of that nature. Usually if a unit has a heavy single shot, then they're slower and susceptible to the rocket, which does take time to launch and does take time to land, but you can probably kill at least some of the enemies. And if you have a whole bunch of them back here, you're gonna be hurting for certain. Another thing I like to pair with the Mammoth is the spy bot, which I completely forgot to build, and I don't really have that much energy income, so it's gonna take literally forever. So I'm not gonna really worry about it. But the spy bot is really great to pair with a mammoth because you can bring them out to the front here, and you can get vision on things like snipers and artillery, and then a spy bot also has the ability to self-destruct and do an EMP damage. Now the EMP damage, or not damage, but like stun. EMP stunning means that now your mammoth has a chance to move up and actually like kill the units that it's up against. So if you have a bunch of snipers that are harassing you constantly, killing all your mammoths, one spy bot comes up to them, EMPs, and then the snipers are stuck in that position. The mammoth can then push up and completely decimate the sniper's fire. So I definitely recommend a sniper, or not a sniper, a mammoth and a spy bot mix. It's very good. And you can also compound that with the arbiter and radar jamming and radar bot, and then you have a rather unstoppable force. Very, very powerful. So now we've got the Fiend. The Fiend is a raiding bot, very similar to the Grunt, but I believe it's a bit faster, especially now. I honestly love the Fiend early, but once you get towards the middle of your T2 phase, they become a lot less strong because they're very weak. They only have 1,000 health, and a lot of T1 units are able to absolutely crush Fiends. T1 and T2 units can crush Fiends. So like if you have a Fiend versus the Janus should be able to kill the Fiend pretty easily. Here we got our spy bot. We'll give an example. So say you're up against a bunch of snipers. We'll pretend these guys are snipers. You can just come up here and self-destruct. Boom. EMP'd. Gives your mammoth a chance to get into range and then shoot them. Very, very handy unit. And it EMPs them for a long time. You got like what, 15 seconds? So it's very, very nice for the mammoth to get those artillery units and wreck them. So it's pretty great. All right, back to the Fiend. So the Fiend is very, very good against T1 most of the time, but if it's a large group of Januses, things like that, it can struggle a little bit because those heavy hits will take it out rather quickly. But it does also do an AoE area of effect, so this whole strip will be taking 240 damage per second, which is very nice, and they're very fast. So you can end up, if there's a wall of defenses here, you can end up just going around and destroying an entire base with just a couple Fiends. Try to use their mobility to their advantage and push around defenses, push around slower units to try to get harassment. They're a very strong harass unit. Late game, as the front lines become more and more established, Fiends are going to be worse because you're not able to take full advantage of their mobility to circle around and harass, and you just have a lot less opportunities to pick your targets. So late game, like extremely late game in the T3 phase, you might find some opportunities to use them a little bit, and like once you punch a hole through, you can smash your Fiends in towards the back economy a bit faster. But aside from that, only use them as like some of your very first T1 unit or T2 units. If you have a T2 advantage on your enemies, you can definitely cause a lot of impact. Now, also another thing with the Fiend is they have a special ability where if they explode, they do like 3 times the damage. It's kind of like a mine exploding. We'll give it for instance here with the Sumo. So if you want to kill something and you're like getting weak, you can just view these like a mine and self-destruct them, and they do a decent amount of damage. I mean, this thing had like 5,000 health, So it did almost 1,000 health of damage, I believe. And they're very handy at taking out large groups of T1 units. You just run them in and then self-destruct them. Boom, they're all done. And you can even take out groups of Sheldon, groups of snipers, things like that with the fiends very rapidly with a little bit of self-destructing micro. Anyway, I hope this helped with like getting unit compositions down and seeing how you will want to use your units. There's obviously more in here, you know, if you guys want to use bed bugs and some of the less commonly used ones like ducks and termites, go for it. But those are a little bit more niche. This is going over the more common compositions you will find. And I hope it was a helpful video. If it was, definitely subscribe. Really appreciate that. We're getting super close to 500 subscribers on the channel, so definitely looking forward to that. We got some stuff coming out for you guys once we hit that number. And as always, I will see you on the battlefield.